business family started by my grandfather, who was a bus driver. He started airline companies, production of movies, he did mining, he started hotels, came back, and that was the time liberalization was happening. But the dismantling of all those controls was making everyone naked and vulnerable, right? We were in 8 different businesses, and it was not sustainable. Because the best in the world were going to come into India, and our technology was archaic, our quality standards were poor. So we shut down or sold quite a few extremely profitable businesses. And so when we started this journey, we took the top 100 companies. Wind forward 30 years later, we are number 6 in the world. And our aspiration is to be in the top 3. And I really don't see why we can't get there. I was born in Coimbatore. Most of my life spent in Coimbatore, except for about 8 years when I was in the US. Business family started by my grandfather, who was a bus driver. Then he built a fleet of buses. It was a bit of a maverick, and for me, he's been a role model because he started airline companies. He did production of movies. He did mining. He started hotels. So he was a fearless entrepreneur. He just went where he thought there were opportunities, always willing to lose everything to build the next. So that's the kind of environment in which I grew up. Then my father and his brothers came into the business. It was the time of, the license Raj. Everything was frugal. Capital was limited. You had to be very innovative in a very different sort of a way. But, for example, my father and his brothers built the mother machines to build the final products. I mean, that's the kind of frugality that was there. So that was an influencing factor. The other thing is Coimbatore as a society was also a very giving society. Giving was a very big part of almost everyone in that society, irrespective of what caste or community you belong to. Everybody gave disproportionately. So if you look at colleges, hospitals, places of learning, social support organizations, they're all run on charity. That has been built by companies that have contributed to this. So this is the kind of environment that I grew up in. I was not a good student. I was more of an athlete. I wanted to be in athletics, but that was not the favored kind of a profession at that time. Went on to do my MBA in the US, and I bit the bug of wanting to be a teacher. So I went on to do my PhD, and I was fortunate enough to do my PhD under Professor C.K. Prahlad, right? So he was in my committee and he was my professor, and we spent extremely energizing conversations with him. Those influenced me as well, because for him, it was about building global companies and no excuses, right? Came back, and that was the time liberalization was happening. Typical of most companies at that time, we had grown horizontal, in multiple businesses, because that's the only way you could grow in the licensing system, So you reached your capacity, you got a license for another product, and so on. But the dismantling of all those controls was making everyone naked and vulnerable, right? We were in 8 different businesses, and it was not sustainable. Because the best in the world were going to come into India, and our technology was archaic, our quality standards were poor, So we had to transform, and we couldn't transform all 8 of them. So we shut down or sold quite a few extremely profitable businesses. I mean, that was a tough call to make at that time. And I'm glad in retrospect we did that because I don't think we'd have been relevant if we'd stayed down that path. So we picked compressors and automotive equipment. That was our parent business. And that was more a India-centric national business. And we said, let's look at building a global business out of compressors. And that was not, to be honest, a very conscious choice. We had to invest in technology, manufacturing, people to stay alive even in India for the compressor business, right? But the investment required was not justified by the size of the Indian market. So, by choice, we had to look at global opportunities. And India was only 3% of the world market. So, clearly, both these put together, that's where we had to go. So, it was a huge transformation exercise. And I think the biggest transformation for us was the culture in the company and the shifting mindset of Indians that this is possible, right? So I think we are conditioned, I think we still are conditioned to believe that we are not as capable, right? In reality, we are. We're more than capable, right? But whatever you are, if you don't believe it, you're limited by what your own self-limiting beliefs are. And I think transforming the belief sets of people as part of that cultural transformation was the biggest challenge. And it still continues. It's not over. We still believe we are inferior. You know, there are still I would say, the hangover from the colonial dynasties of the past. We still believe that we're not as good, right? So that's really the transformation. So when we started this journey, we took the top 100 companies in compressors, and we were not even in that list, right? Wind forward 30 years later, we are number 6 in the world, and our aspiration is to be in the top 3. And I really don't see why we can't get there, right? Some of the foundational building blocks at a more architectural level, besides the culture, was the technology piece. You know, as a post-independence and the licensing system, we were relying on collaboration, technical collaborations with European, American, and subsequently Japanese companies to bring the technology into our country and to other respective companies. Now, what you got in a licensing system was know-how. You got a set of drawings, got a set of specifications, and they tell you how the products are put together. Now, know-how is good for making profits, but it makes you a slave to the technology because you don't have the ability to build the next. And to build the next, you need know why. Not just how things are put together, but why are they put together the way they are, right? That gives you the ability to build the next. And that's more at a level of science. This is more at a level of engineering, right? So we had to build that, right? And it's a long process. It took us, we're still learning, but I believe we are good now in know why of our domain. We can teach companies how to build the next. And we're already delivering those kinds of new technologies to customers now. So that was one big foundation. The other huge foundation was quality. Outside of India, we still are relatively unknown brands and with a made in India label, right? If you are a European or an American company with an American brand or European brand, and your product fails, you'll be forgiven. You're an Indian company fighting hard in markets in Europe and America. You cannot fail. You will not be forgiven. You will not get the next opportunity. So quality had to be architected at a level that was where you say, as good is not good enough, right? It had to be far, far better. Failure was not an option, right? And that's a long journey, and it's still continuing on, right? So that was the third pillar. Second pillar. The third pillar was we believed that a true global company is country agnostic, meaning it can set up itself anywhere in the world and still be profitable, which basically meant, which says, we can't build a company on the back of cheap Indians. We need to build a company where Indians are expensive, right? Not only does it make you global and unshackles you from the tyranny of cheapness, yeah, it also gives you, it's the right thing to do. It's equitable, right? It is not like a disproportionate distribution of wealth, right? So we felt that is very, very important. So that was the third pillar, and we're continuing down that path, right? I can't put a value on that. How does that contributed to quality? How does that contributed to our building of technology, It's huge. It's almost priceless what we do. Yeah. So that took us on a journey, and we said, okay, we went through multiple strategies. One was build the foundational core and sell the core to everyone all over the world, and they will make the full compressor. That didn't work. Then we said, let's do Elgi inside, where we go and buy small companies all over the world, keep the brand outside, put Elgi inside. It's like the Intel strategy, Intel inside. That didn't work either. So finally we landed on saying, we're going to build this company on the brand Elgi globally, right? And that's what we did. And geographically, we experimented going into different markets. China was one. We were there for almost 10 years. And we realized that while Europe and America present a challenge in perception, China was a real challenge because their belief of their ability and willingness to recognize and pay for an Indian brand was very low. Whereas in Europe and America, they're very objective. They don't have any biases towards brand. They're very mercenary about deliver this and I'm willing to consider. So we made a pivot and said we will go after these markets which in our mind were very challenging. But in reality, we see after our experience, it's a lot easier in these markets than in actually Asian markets for an Indian brand, right? So that's really been our journey, and that's where I am right now and the whole team. Yeah.
That's great to hear about your journey. I don't know many companies in India who have that kind of a vision which you have evolved over a period of time. And as you rightly said, you're starting your generation from grandfather, how it came about, that itself shows the commitment to the nation, building and then learning the lessons through liberalization. And I think that's remarkable.
Thank you.
So can you explain a little more detail as to how the concept of quality evolved with this change?
I think we started like any other company, looked at customer-facing defects. And the starting point is resolve the defects. That was the the whole quality management system was about control and to ensure that, the defects don't get passed on to the customer. Resolution of complaints we've already created a bad experience. The customers already had a problem. So we had to go to the next level of saying, how do you get to assurance, right? Where there is absolutely no defect, right? And I think that transformation was across the organization. It is not just, you had to deploy quality in just about every nook and corner of the organization. And that was a big transformation for the company, right from procurement, design, manufacturing, of course, and assembly, but also in sales. How do you sell the right compressor so that the customer doesn't have defects? This was a much larger transformation. And that transformation journey still continues, because for me, quality has absolutely no end horizon. It keeps on shifting. You can keep pushing the envelope further and further and further. And I think that's a fabulous part of the whole concept of quality. And that's really where we are. So it started with this, simple quality control, and then the whole learning journey of taking it to a very high standard. Yeah.
So I think it also had something to do with your vision to be selling to the developed world,
Yeah.
who are more discerning in terms of their requirement for quality. And as you rightly said, you attempted in China. Indian market was not so big.
Mm-hmm.
And so most companies in India, as I see, they prefer to go to export markets only in Africa and Southeast Asia, lower end. Very few of them attempt to go to the developed world. Even today, in spite of Manufacturing Competitiveness Council working for almost 10 years, business leaders still feel that it's easy to make money in India. It's difficult to sell in foreign countries in terms of quality of our products. And obviously they get at a discount because the buyer doesn't have a strong image of India.
Sure.
So we export only when we don't make enough money in India. That syndrome still persists with many companies. And those who export basically export to these countries where the expectation quality is not very high.
Mm-hmm. I would say, by and large, I agree with you, but there are increasing instances of exceptions to that. There are a lot of companies, which for me is very endearing to see, taking their products and visibly making their presence felt in markets like Europe and the US, right? So I'm hoping that's that's a trajectory that everyone looks at and then starts emulating it. And I think the fundamental driver for that is the size of the opportunity. Africa, yes, it may be easy to do, or Middle East or Southeast Asia, wherever it is, maybe in your mind it's easier to do business. But the real size of the opportunity exists. We need to go where the market is, rather than where it is convenient for us to do business. You have Mahindra's tractors business in the US. It was fascinating and very endearing to see a Mahindra tractor tilling the land in the middle of nowhere in the US, and you have Balakrishna tires. They are sponsoring some of the, the classical big, monster truck shows. So it's great to see companies who have got that aspiration and that vision of actually going and delivering it, right? So I'm hoping that's just the starting, and I think everybody starts aspiring for that.
I agree. Balakrishna Tire is a classical example. They export all over the world.
Absolutely.
And Mahindra Tractors, fortunately, we were involved in their journey when they wanted to be number one in the world.
Yeah.
And the Deming journey, we were involved in late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
And they got there.
Yes, absolutely.
And they're absolutely right. It's wonderful to see the Mahindra Tractors, not only in USA, but in Australia and other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Well, there are very few companies, and let's hope
Sure.
there are many more willing to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Because again, the challenge really is that, right, if India has to grow in terms of per capita income, the growth rate, if we serve only Indian market, can only be 7%, 8%. But the need is maybe 10, 12% growth rate, like China is doing today. Japan did, Korea did, Taiwan did.
Yeah.
And they got independence at about the same time as we did.
Absolutely.
So unless we sell to the European market, to the developed world, because Africa is a $3 trillion economy. Europe and USA, the ones who can afford to buy. So unless we sell there in those countries, how will we grow at a much faster rate?
That is true. Absolutely. I mean, that's really where the opportunity is. But also taking off from the point that you're making in terms of developing our nation, we can't keep Indians cheap. They have to be expensive. So the way to make that happen is to sell value to the customer, not sell price to the customer. Of course, Indian product, till such time India reaches that pinnacle of, of reputation, there will be a discount. That's a given. So there's really no point talking about it. I always say, when you walk into the customer's office, talk about the value that you're giving. And when you're leaving the customer's office, just before you close the door, you say, "Sir, by the way, we can also give you a good price." Rather than go there and have the entire conversation based on price, right? Because when you sell a product on price, you're making your people cheap at the background, right? You need to build technology which adds value. You sell that value. You build a product which has got absolute quality, where customer will buy with eyes closed and say, I trust you. And if you're Indian, till such time India reaches that reputation, it's okay. You give it at a discount to get in. But the discount should not be the lead. The value should be the lead. And to do that, you need to build technology. You can't create value without really putting substance into your product. And we have the capability. We have the capability to build it, right? But it's a commitment and a long journey, right? So for me, quality is not just the quality of the product, but it's the quality of the value you're presenting to the customer, right? And the value that you bring to your organization, to the people in your organization, and consequently to the people of the country, right? If we keep them cheap, then I don't think we are serving it very well.
I think this aspect of bringing value to the people who work with us is totally new in India today. Thank you for bringing this thinking up, because by and large, most companies still prefer to work, how do I cut cost? And the first thing is labor cost by contract labor, this, that, and the other. It's still very prevalent. But the point which you mentioned of transition from low-value products, low quality image, to high quality, Japan is a classical example. Absolutely. Japanese products were considered cheap, and within 2 decades, they were probably the preferred products. And as you rightly said, they offered value proposition to the developed world at a price they couldn't match. So they worked on efficiency and effectiveness both.
Sure.
And that's how they developed the whole system of management which is today adopted by the rest of the world as well. So if they were able to do it, why are we still struggling to make that transition?
I think it's a mindset issue that is based on a very short cycle of profitability or the way you run the business. Fundamentally, Janak, we all go to work to improve our standard of living. And one aspect of standard of living is what we earn. But if we architect a company strategy based on being cheap, then we are shooting ourselves in our own foot, right? Now, as a CEO or the owner of the company, if I say, I want to be expensive, I want the rest to be cheap, and that's not fair, right? There is no equity in the system. No company in the world, absolutely, you can take any company. There's absolutely no global company that has this level of inequity. Equity has to be built in for the fundamental reason, the capability of the organization is the people. Now, if you don't have equity, you're not going to get the best people to come in. So it's not rocket science, right? But the question really is, what's the time horizon you're looking at for building the organization? If it's too short, then you're looking for instant nirvana. But if you take a longer view and say, how can I build it out where my value, my wealth will be 100 times bigger? At the same time, the people working in the organization, the inequity is a fraction, right, of what it is today. Now, you take a longer term view, it's possible to build it, right? I don't see that as a difficult thing, but it requires that commitment to make that happen, right? I keep giving this, common example of a plastic bottle. A plastic bottle costs 2 rupees, and it's so cheap. So people use it and throw it away and abuse the environment. If that bottle was glass and expensive, they will find ways to reuse it and use it judiciously. It's the same thing with people cost. They're cheap, they are overused and abused. They're expensive, they're used very carefully, right? So I think it's all how you frame the whole problem.